I'll start again. Good evening, everyone. This is the Thursday, July 18th, 2024 meeting of the Finance Administration Committee meeting. My name is Jim Spear. I'm the chair. Michael Salmonson is a member. Michael Gardini is a member. We are the Finance Administration Committee. We have Matt West, who's the borough manager, with us, and we have Alan Gazzardo, the assistant borough manager. And first on the agenda is approval of minutes for June.
I move to approve the June 2024 minutes.
I will second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving? Great. Approved minutes for June. Treasurer's report, Mr. West.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. The only thing I would like to draw this committee's attention to is about half an hour ago, I updated the meeting packet for the profit and loss budget versus actual report. If you remember at last month's meeting cycle, council approved a budget amendment. And what we're finding in our QuickBooks is that we can't go and add updates to budgeted amounts in new items. So we're gonna have to go and create a new budget for you all. So what I did, right, I manually entered those figures in and updated the first sheet, page 2 of the budget versus actual. So now you'll see budgeted amounts for the first 3 expense line items. All of the other budget updates had been made, just so you could see that has been filled in. Professional services, auto allowance, and deferred comp, employer contribution. Other than that, I don't have anything else to draw the committee's attention to, unless the committee has questions for me.
Didn't seem like there were any surprises in there.
Thankfully, no.
Always good.
Cool. No questions at all? Okay. Audit update.
Our audit continues to track. I'm not going to say on schedule because it's taking longer than usual. 2023, as I keep saying, was a difficult year for the borough, and so this year's the 2023 audit is going to take longer than usual. We're continuing to track well. Our auditors are scheduled to be on site, I believe, in 2 weeks, and that's a good sign. They don't schedule on-site activities until they're ready to, get near finalization of it. So our CPA, our professional services CPA, is really helping us, and Kathleen especially. I wanted to give a shout out to Kathleen George, our bookkeeper, administrative assistant, who's been spearheading our audit process. Looking forward to 2024 and making it much more streamlined.
2020. Oh, I see.
The 2024
Right.
audit.
Got it. Took me a minute. Okay. Scheduled bills. Anybody with questions on scheduled bills?
No, I didn't see anything in there that was odd or unusual.
Yep, none for me.
Anything fun to call our attention to?
I don't think so. I mean, I can find something if you'd like.
A random line item. All right, very good. Someone make a motion for approval of scheduled bills.
I move to recommend scheduled bills for the general sewer, solid waste, capital, highway aid, and green funds totaling $289,718.10.
I will second.
All in favor of recommending that? It is approved to recommend that. Great. Let's move on to discussion items. Record clerk office assistant job advertisement update.
I am excited to announce to this committee that our interviewing committee, our interview panel, has unanimously decided on a candidate, and we forwarded a conditional offer of employment to this candidate, and she has accepted. And it is conditioned upon, of course, official affirmative action by council, which will be on tonight's meeting agenda, as well as a criminal background investigation, fingerprinting, and drug screening. The criminal investigation, the background investigation, and fingerprinting are specific to the police department's activities, since this new position will be splitting some of their time facilitating office administrative support services for our police department. Those two things are required to get them access to police records. So we're really excited. Her name is Kelsey Reimer Fisher, and she comes to municipal work with a different perspective. Recent graduate of a Pennsylvania College of Art and Design, and you might say, why are we hiring an art major? Because it became really evident that all of the folks that we interviewed for this position could do the job. And so it became fit, personality fit, and what other skill sets could you bring that would really set you apart. And that attention to detail, she's more of a graphic design emphasis person than fine art. She likes order, she likes organization and details. And she's really good with social media and websites, and is really interested in helping us be more proactive with our communication.
Oh,
as
wow,
well.
that's great.
So,
That's great to hear that.
yes.
Yeah.
So we are really excited about it, and she has accepted the conditional offer, got that today, as I forwarded to council, and I'm really excited.
So you may recall that when we had our priorities meeting, that I took charge of outside communications as being within my bailiwick or whatever. So I want to meet her as soon as she's hired. I would love to sit down with her because I've been thinking about how we can better communicate to the public at large.
And that was one thing that was evident through, in speaking with her references. One of her references talked about how she's able to curate social media and understands the public sphere. Oh, tell me more. And can tell a story.
Yeah.
So we need help with that.
Yeah. Yep.
This committee,
awesome.
we will be doing communications review, I believe, in the second half of the year
Mhm.
in finance administration. So if you, I don't know, at what point do we involve
Yeah, no, we should get her involved from the
actual
start.
brass tacks?
Right, yeah, and get her ideas and input from the start.
Very cool.
Cool.
Glad to hear it. We don't need to move anything? Or
I was thinking of that tonight, on my way up here tonight. I was like, I don't know, I'm bringing it to full council.
Yeah, I don't think
This
we have to
committee
wait.
wasn't involved in that hiring process. I mean, it's something that I was thinking about, that maybe for future hires, maybe it could generate through this committee, but I don't want to overcomplicate things either, so.
I mean, informational is fine.
Okay, all right, cool.
80 Windsor Ave update.
All right, we are close to being finished with the roof reinforcement project. All of the structural work, I'd say 99.5% of the structural work is done. The remaining 0.5% will be completed tomorrow, which are arguably maybe the most important part, the tie rods. So there's going to be tie rods. Without being able to see it and visualize it, it's going to be difficult for me to explain it. But each structure has these little brackets on either side, and the tie rod is going to connect to both of them. In the middle will be a turnbuckle, and that's where our structural engineer will be on site with the contractor to make sure they get that to the right tension, and that's what's going to make the thing work. So that's the only thing that's left to do, and that'll be happening tomorrow. And we're still working on coming up with a date for a ribbon cutting. We'd like to have council and all of our community partners be involved in that. We're doing some other housekeeping work. I don't know if you walked by recently, scraping the gajillion layers of paint on the doors and the windows in the front, because we just want to make it look as inviting as possible when we have our ribbon cutting / open house later this summer. So our public works crew is working on that, and all of the other maintenance related items have been completed that council heard last month, and those fees will all be under our budgeted amount for 80 Windsor Avenue maintenance. And those are the items that we'll be getting reimbursement for through partnership with the library and the Girl Scouts, as well as the Narberth Borough Industrial Development Authority. So yes, we're putting out, we're footing the bill to start, but we will be receiving almost reimbursement for almost the entire cost.
Is there a target realistic date for when they can start moving back in library?
We have, good question, that's the $1 million question. I went over,
$800,000.
oh, okay, all right, maybe 750,000 then? I walked over yesterday and, so both of the wings have been mostly cleared out and things have been started to move in. Public Works has been moving things into both of those wings. The library itself, the plywood structures are still around all of the stacks of books. So I'm guessing probably within a week.
Oh, wow, okay.
Like all of that stuff will be gone.
Okay,
So then we just need to do some deep cleaning and just organizing and just do some finishing touches.
okay,
Okay,
that's great.
cool.
I assume the library will be open prior to our.
To our ribbon cutting.
Just to
Yeah,
get-
that's what I was.
We don't want to, we don't want to make them wait until we're ready for our ribbon
Well,
cutting.
and it's tough to do a ribbon cutting in end of July, early August, if we really want it to be a community event, because people aren't around, so.
Yeah, I was thinking September timeframe.
Early September. Yeah.
Sounds really good. Okay, let's check in on rules and procedures of council that we've been working on these many months. So we did hear back from the solicitor with our list of questions, and Michael was able to produce another draft, right?
Yeah, and then, I mean, I think there's like a couple areas where there was kind of like, fill in reference here.
Yeah.
And then there's one area, like even in the old rules, that was just bracketed and basically said like, fill in
Right.
process. And
Yeah.
it had never been filled in. And that was like, had to do with, the swearing in of the mayor during organization. I don't know enough about that process to fill that in, so that seems like something that, I don't know, that Walco could probably knows what the state law requires for that and can fill that in pretty easily. But yeah, his, I think I took his, feedback in terms of the committee system and pretty just incorporated that pretty straightforward. And then I guess the only thing between now and I guess next month, the only kind of decision points or whatnot, aren't really decision points because they're things we discussed at prior meetings, but just wanted to check back and, reconfirm the piece regarding virtual participation of council members. So I just, as a refresher, the way it's structured right now, it kind of, there's an expectation in there now that if you're a council member who's going to have to miss the meeting, that you need to notify ahead of time with a reason, and then it kind of gives expectations for, what are reasons that are, and they're pretty broad, but it's basically a way to say like, you can't just, I didn't feel like coming in today type of thing.
I don't want to see people.
Yeah.
Seems like just about anything is covered in the just legal reasons.
I think it's basically anything, other than I didn't feel like it.
I think it's
Oh,
more about
okay.
the tone of like,
In the folder.
there's an expectation that if you can make it in person.
You should
be
be
in
there.
person.
So there was that, and then there was, and the other piece of it that kind of we had talked about was what happens if someone blinks out of existence on the screen if they're participating. And if you'll remember when we discussed that, the process as outlined in there is nothing that wouldn't already exist today. It was, I think, more so the concept of outlining it was just to say, these are rules that already exist under Robert's rules, which is what generally governs us if there's a need for to govern us. And so it's just kind of saying, this is the process that you would follow if someone wanted to motion to table an item or whatever to deal with that. Not that you have to do that, not that there's some sort of automatic trigger, but just alerting council members as to, here's a process that you would follow if you had some sort of issue during the meeting and you wanted to table an item so that someone could participate.
Yeah. I think maybe the new thing that we're writing, stop me if this is not what but just the expectation, like if somehow the remote link is cut, the meeting will go on without you, if
Yeah.
if you're dropped from the call.
But somebody in the room could
Right.
say, okay, wait, before we vote, because you don't want to end up, if it looks like it's otherwise going to be a tie vote, for example, you'd rather have that person try to get back in, I think was the idea.
Mhm.
There's a process to stop
Yeah,
the discussion if somebody felt like it was appropriate to do it.
yeah, and it defines that. And again, like, I tried to do it in the way that this is what would occur if you knew Robert's rules, but my reason in listing it out that way was to say, my expectation is that none of us are like parliamentary procedure experts and may not know that unless it's in there. But then, so it being in there, you kind of have fair notice that, hey, here's something that you can do if you find yourself in that situation. The only other piece of that, right, was, and this is still written in there, so if for some reason we wanted to revisit this, we can, but I wanted to flag it just because it was a difference, which was to say, if you blinked out of existence and then you end up missing the vote, there is a thing in here that basically says that you can, state not like reasons or anything like that. You can state what you would have voted if you had been present. It's specified in there that it doesn't affect the vote. You're not allowed to state reasons, but that, if you remember in our prior conversation, that was in there just to allow someone the opportunity to say, yes, I would have said yes to this or whatnot. And so that's still in there, and if for any reason we want to revisit that, we can, but I wanted to flag kind of those.
The one thing I forgot to look at on that was, did we put a time limit on that?
Yes,
That's what I
it's specified like
thought.
how,
Yeah.
you can't just like 2 weeks later. show
Or
up
like
and
it
be
becomes a big political hot potato and you're like, I would have voted no on that. you know?
Right.
Yeah, okay. I thought we had discussed it and I didn't remember to look back to make sure that that was there.
So I think it's all substantially there, right, in
We
the
just
in the
need to fill in
draft.
those few little things,
Right.
so maybe we
Yeah.
can get it out next month.
That's what I was hoping. that-
It should be like, as long as there's like, if there's any other things that, folks had, concerns with or wanted to revisit that we've already discussed, then like now's the opportunity that we can bring those things up. And likewise, Matt or Alan, if you had any items that you wanted to bring up, because then if we can air those, and then if we can get, per the solicitor's guidance, when we are talking about, we figure things out here, and then in between the meetings, we can implement the things that we figured out here.
Yeah.
So to the extent that we can air them, let's do it now, and then we'll have the implementation period before
Right.
the next.
So I did make a couple of I don't know if you could see them when
I did, and those
Okay.
those all seemed fine, and those were, again, like implementation,
Yeah.
administration
Yeah.
stuff, like making sure that it's
Right.
consistent with state law and those types of
Yeah.
things. Which I think, we've also discussed that and have agreement on at a high level, so I think those are just kind of like administrative kind of updates.
Yeah.
My only thought, Jim, is you're not gonna be here in August. And I think it would be
Yeah.
good for you to be part of the discussion when we present it to council.
Well,
So should we
So
put it on the agenda for September instead?
Michael and I had talked about
Okay.
getting together in the next few weeks and maybe putting together a little slideshow or something
Okay.
that outlines the main points
Okay.
of what's changed and what's
I can-
highlighted in the
Yeah, and
draft.
since you'll be virtual, you can,
No,
I hope-
it's probably not gonna,
I hope
it's gonna
to
be
be-
midnight.
I will
so-
try to be virtual. But maybe procedurally, are we just maybe showing a draft to the full council next month? Would that be what we want to do? And just get some feedback from the rest of council and not,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
because I don't think I need to be
right.
necessarily over that. I
Okay.
don't want to hold it up another month because I'm not here. But we could conceivably next month at the August business meeting, show them the draft and show a couple of slides about.
or if it's
highlights.
just a discussion, is that better for like a workshop meeting? Or do I?
There was no workshop
We don't
meeting
have
in August,
Right.
they're combined, so I mean, we could add this, just like tonight's meeting, there is a committee update at the beginning of the meeting. I think it would be appropriate for that. I like the idea of introducing it to council and then letting it rest for a month
Yeah.
in order to get any other
Yeah.
feedback and then taking official action at that,
My question.
at that following meeting.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
I think it would be appropriate to introduce it next month.
Do you think a little slideshow would
Sure.
be okay? Okay.
And anything they don't like, we'll just blame on Jim.
And so, do y'all have additional things that you wanted to air now?
I unfortunately have not gone through it with a fine tooth comb. Now that I know it's going to be in front of God and everybody next month, I will prioritize this and I'll go through it and provide any other feedback that I have.
Okay, and I'll put on my homework list to try to get like a, like one-page summary of items. So that it's, so you don't have to, you know, read everything line by, well, I mean, you can certainly go through with fine tooth comb, but just so the broader, you know, council doesn't have to kind of like flip back and forth and type things.
You mentioned that Walko already did his review, and he was.
No, we had.
None of this
Specific question.
We had some specific questions about things like
Okay, so he hasn't
legally
done a
how it works,
comprehensive
but he hasn't
review of
looked at the
document.
thing as a
Okay.
whole, right? We had like 4 or 5 questions for him.
I was only asking that because earlier when we were talking about what to do when someone is cut off when they're remote, can we factor in their vote or, you know, just to put them on the record that they would have voted a certain way, just want to make sure like he reviews that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we tried to specify that it wouldn't like factor in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just so that if somebody wants to be able to put on the record what they would have been able to say. Or-
Yeah.
I mean, they could do that by posting
Yeah,
on
I mean-
Facebook, for example. I don't know.
Yeah, and I took that out of kind of like, that seems to be a common procedure I've seen in other levels of government, because where folks are missing votes because they're sprinting through things. And again, there it's like, it doesn't affect the vote, it's just this person came back in and stated X, Y, Z. But if we don't want to include that, then we obviously don't have to include that.
It seems reasonable to include that, Great.
So are we looking to have a final version for next Finance and Administration Committee meeting, or?
Well, that would be before the business meeting, so maybe not. We wouldn't necessarily have a final draft because we still will have not brought it to council.
Oh, yeah, so for the version going to council, I think that's the intent, is that we'd have that, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But not for their approval, just here's what we're thinking.
As a discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just show and tell.
Okay. And then hopefully in September it's approved then? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh, for the mayor swearing in, you know, you can just do the same process as you do for swearing in council members, just have a district judge or a magistrate do the mayor swearing in.
Okay.
That's what we did in my previous community.
Okay.
The mayor can also swear in council members though.
No, what I'm saying for swearing in the mayor.
You have to swear in the mayor first, and then the mayor swears in.
Yeah.
And the mayor can't swear in herself?
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah, okay, yep.
I don't know, if you don't need somebody to marry you in Pennsylvania, you can just marry each other without an officiant.
And then we're gonna
Just swear
have
themselves
a
in.
quiz administered by all council members and staff regarding these rules to see who's been following them. 'Cause-
You
We
know-
tried to match this up with our current process, but I think more so it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
about whether
Yeah.
you're like following every rule to a
Right.
T. It's there in case you run into like a hard spot.
Right, and
where
then you have
need
something to
rule.
reference to.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
And I think that's how kind of like Robert's rules generally,
Yeah.
like the vibe is like, you don't need Robert's rules until you need the rules, and then you have
Right.
something to
Until you have
follow.
to adjudicate something, yeah.
Yep.
I'm just really honing in on minutes. Very specific of requirements for the minutes that I'm not sure.
And we can change those. I think the minutes, I kind of just tried to reflect whatever was there, but we can make that more general.
Okay.
So anything
Nothing
like,
that's like, oh my gosh, no. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. If this is what you agreed upon, then
Yeah.
we need to update some processes
I
also.
think you should feel
Yeah.
free to weigh in on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah, and I think that kind of is administrative, because like I think the goal that we've all agreed on is that we want these to match up with our processes. To the extent that they don't, that's an administrative thing for us to update.
Right. Okay, anything else on this? Sounds like a plan. All right, boards and commissions review. So this is something we started to look at last month. We assigned ourselves 4 committees to reach out to and contact and to just get a sense of what their membership is like, and how stable it is, and what they feel is not working on that committee, about mostly about keeping membership active and in place and engaged and feeling valued and all that. And we had a list of questions. How do we want to go through this? So I contacted my 4. I have a sense of, well, I'll start with my 4, sure. I think 2 of them, which I think is probably the majority of most committees, are very straightforward. They're 3-person committees that are, I think they're required by state law. There's no surprises. It's the zoning hearing board, 3 people plus an alternate, and the UCC Board of Appeals, that's 4 seats and 1 vacancy, all right. Both of those reported that they have a good, healthy membership. They're really not concerned about them getting filled when somebody steps down. I think those are not a problem. And what's more, their role is very well defined. We wouldn't be able to change it even if we wanted to. Shade Tree Commission, they have 5 seats and just had a recent resignation. That's another one that's got pretty healthy but low turnover. I've never noticed them having a problem filling a seat, and they don't, and they feel the same way, that they'll always have a good pool of volunteers, and it's probably not a concern. And then the last one was Human Rights Commission, which is something we've all sort of noticed as sort of perpetual vacancies lately. I did talk to Rebecca Starr, who's the chair at the moment, and last month we said we would invite her in for a future meeting. She cannot make it until September to come in and talk to us, but I still feel like that's a good move to have her in to talk about Human Rights Commission and sort of what its future, if we can make any tweaks to that committee, whether it be in its size or its scope. It's probably a good idea. She seemed open to talking about all of that. That's probably the one I think is, for my list anyway, I think
A
it's,
problem child.
yeah,
Yeah.
needs a little attention.
Did she give any sense of like whether people are intimidated by what they have to do? Because, it's tough. Like if you get a charge in, you're actually, I'll just say this based on my own expertise, it's really sometimes difficult and tricky to accuse a neighbor or store owner or whatever of fill in the blank ism, right? Ageism, sexism, racism, whatever it is. And I don't know whether part of this is the difficulty in filling this position is either like, there's a quasi-legal element to it that can be a little bit intimidating, but there's also if somebody does something wrong, I'm going to have to say that they've done something bad. Which is a little different than a lot of other commissions where it's not like you've done something bad, you maybe want to do something bad, and we're not going to let you do it because it doesn't fit our rules and regulations. It's just something to contemplate. Like I've been trying to figure out why people might be reluctant. Because, I know people in the field and I keep saying, hey, we have an opening. Wouldn't you like to be on the Human Relations Commission? No.
I think of so I've asked like 2 folks if they would consider applying to see if we can fill that vacancy, and I don't know, that might be like, I don't know if that's a thing, they hadn't mentioned it, but that's something that maybe you wouldn't mention if you were, if that was kind of in the back of your head. The 2 things that I had heard was one from someone who kind of like had a blanket policy that they don't, serve on these sorts of bodies, just a personal kind of thing, because they feel like they get asked a lot about that and they don't want to say yes to some and no to others. And then the other one kind of was, they didn't say no, they said they would think about it. It was more of like a time commitment, and they wanted to make sure that if they said that they would apply for it, it was something that they had, the actual capacity to spend time doing. So those were kind of like the two things I heard about that, but neither of those people had even heard of the Human Relations Commission before I brought it up to them, so which made me kind of wonder like how much of it is also are people even aware, of the commission?
Well, that's one part of my communications plan is, every week we have these openings on commissions, boards if you want to serve. But what I'd really like to do is each month highlight a commission or board that has an opening and say, hey, there's an opening on the Human Relations Commission. What is it? What do they do? What's the time commitment? Actually lay it out
Sure.
and see it. And then the next month, a different commissioner or board. Then
Right.
just sort of we have ways to get involved. Nobody ever,
Yeah.
Right.
we all know that the way people get involved is.
I kind of think
one-on-one
we should fool people into learning about the boards and commissions. Like, next year we have like a block party.
Well,
People like coming by the block party are like, come in and get a beer and also learn about,
We've talked about doing that more formally. Like, we're gonna have all our chairs of our boards and commissions in the room if you wanna come learn about them and ways to get involved. Or as you say, bait and switch them. or have a table at.
Come for the beer, stay for the boards.
Or have a table at the next arts festival.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a number of things we could do, but like in HRC's case, I think we want to examine their scope first, see whether this, if we can fine tune it a little bit, define it a little better maybe, and then do a recruitment push.
And what's their, right now we say 7?
It's a 7-person commission,
It has to be
and they have
that big.
4 vacancies.
Is that, and they're a board that has certain like statutory restrictions, but 7 seems like a lot, so I would assume that that's not out, like, I'm assuming the state doesn't require us to have 7 seats there.
I'm almost certain that's not the case.
Yeah.
You could probably have 3.
Yeah, I mean, you want an odd number, but I think you can be as low as 3.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if that's something.
I mean, local commissions, you don't even have to have a local commission, so I
Right.
don't think that there's,
But we have
Any
we currently
statutory-
have we have rules about like civil rights in our code, right?
Right.
So like, I assume that if you have those, you have to have something to adjudicate it. You just have them, how does any of that get adjudicated at that point?
a majority of boroughs and municipalities in the state of Pennsylvania have no adjudicatory body.
So then you just have rules, but they don't matter because there's no one to enforce them?
Right.
Okay, I don't know that I would, if we're gonna have those rules, then we should probably have some sort of thing to adjudicate it, but 7 members on a commission that we can't fully staff right now seems like a lot.
Probably the majority of the human rights coverage is covered by the state, right?
Or the feds, right?
Okay, yeah.
So, primarily, historically, the whole reason why these local ordinances tended to come up was to cover gaps
Yeah.
in the laws that weren't.
Mhm.
So, for example, for us, it was wanting to make sure that LGBTQ coverage was there because it was not clearly there at the federal or state level. That's changed a little bit, but that's a lot where a lot of these local ordinances came from, was a desire to fill in the gaps that didn't exist for certain protected classes.
Right. That makes sense to me.
Would we be able to like just do the gap stuff?
You
locally,
could, I mean,
leave
you
everything
could,
else?
but as long as you have it, you might as well have one. The other idea of the local things is it's a little less formal and intimidating than, going to file with the EOC so EOC for employment stuff,
Yeah.
for public accommodations at the federal level, you actually have to file with the Department of Justice. just saying the words Department of Justice
Yeah.
to people scares the crap out of them.
But that's the
And
exact-
it's like, no, these are like, you know,
Yeah.
you're not claiming some criminal thing. That's
Right.
just where the statute sends you on a
Right.
reasonable accommodation.
But that's like
And
the
then
flip
the-
side
yeah.
of what you said earlier is that, you know, having all local people deal with your local problems
Yeah.
can be a little awkward
Yeah,
or it
yeah.
can be.
And then at the state level, you know, the problem is you're going to be either in Philadelphia, Harrisburg, or Pittsburgh. They're all overburdened, so like you could file in Philadelphia and end up with an investigator in Harrisburg and get scheduled for a hearing in Harrisburg. You know, nobody wants to, they're going to be like, it's not worth it.
Okay, well, we're gonna have her in September, so we have a couple more months to crunch on this. Does anyone else want to talk about commissions and this?
I mean,
You wanna go first?
so I only got to talk to one so far because I made the foolish mistake of sending out an email saying, here are my questions, you can either respond to me in writing or you can have a phone call. You know, it's like the classic, you just say, I'm calling you. So I did then follow up and talk to Dennis at Hart. And it was generally a very favorable report. One thing that they don't have any vacancies. When they were set up, they have staggered terms, which he thinks works really well. So if people want to go off, you know, they know that when they'd be going off. He seems to, everybody is re-upped so far, and he doesn't think that anybody's not going to go at the next go-round who's ever up. One thing that I didn't know was that you don't have to be a resident of the borough to serve on the Hart. So they
Yes.
are allowed to pull expertise, and that's important because they really do want people with specific expertise. They want architects, they want historic preservation people. The only thing that they have to have by law is they actually have to have a real estate professional. Yeah, which is sort of odd because the real estate professional doesn't have to have historical or architectural experience, historic
Yeah.
preservation or architectural experience. They've got 7 people. They've been stable with 7 people. He thinks that's a good number and it's the right number and it's easy to, you know, therefore delegate to people different tasks and they spread the work out pretty fairly. He did say that the state used to run courses on historic preservation and he thought it would be good if they still are offering it. He was like, his ask was, hey, if they're still offering these courses, it would be really nice if the borough paid for one or more of us to go and get a refresher. They've got 3 architects, 1 architectural historian, 1 real estate broker. That's only 5, I don't remember who the other 2 are. Seems it's just right size, and he doesn't think they need an alternate. So,
That reminds me, there's sort of a side issue that I was thinking about is that we want these commissions to really feel connected, you know, to the important work they're doing, you know, and valued. In some cases, they're, you know, particularly with Shade Tree Commission, you know, sometimes they feel, you know, or they would sort of like more involvement about, you know, just in between tasks about tree care and things like that. We don't really have a formal structure for them to do a report at the
Right.
moment. Like they don't really come to public health and safety.
right.
They don't, obviously they don't come here.
Yeah, I mean, I do
But
think.
there's some committees that they work on their own and they're not fully connected, you know.
Right,
not
well,
fully
and we
touching
got a
the-
little, I got a little bit of that from Harb too. They said, you know, we actually have both a regulatory advisory role, but we also have sort of a public education mandate. And they've done some public education in the past to the public as a whole. He said that's sort of fallen by the wayside. He really wants to do that again. And I said, yeah, you know, absolutely. You want to create some visibility so that they're not just being visible when they tell somebody who wants to change their property, no, you can't do it, or well, they can't say you can't do it. They can only say, we would like you not to do it, and here's what we recommend instead. And they, like, people get annoyed with us, obviously, because they want to do what they want to do, and it would be helpful for us to be able to explain to the public, not in that sort of reactive phase. what we do, what our thinking is and why, and what we're trying to accomplish. So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, and so I spoke with Planning Commission, Narberth Industrial Development Authority, Parks and Recreation Board, and Police Advisory Commission, the chairs of those, and I believe Planning and Parks are both 7 members, and the other 2, Industrial Development and what was the 4th one that I just said?
Police Advisory Committee.
Police Advisory, I believe they're both 5, if I'm remembering correctly. In terms of the membership size, all of the chairs kind of indicated generally they thought the sizes were fine, that in terms of the way they operate, but they're, within that kind of general thought that they thought the sizes were fine, there was kind of a sentiment of, but, if council at some point wants to reevaluate the sizes, like we haven't thought about this, but it's something that, we would engage with if council wanted kind of to engage with us on that. There was one of the chairs did say that they thought that having the larger number helped them kind of meet quorum.
I was about to say, that's
Yeah.
the one thing I didn't mention about that. He said the exact same thing. So the nice thing about 7 is it helps us get to quorum.
Yeah, because of the volunteer roles, especially around, when folks are traveling. Another chair did mention to say, okay, well, as if you're looking also to reduce sizes, one way that you could kind of try to manage that is to have alternates for those spaces, because then it helps you meet quorum, and also it provides like an onboarding, like you then kind of have almost like succession planning, right? So you theoretically you have fewer instances where you just have persistent vacancies because the alternate's kind of like ready to step in. So that was kind of, that was one comment that we received on that. Like I said, generally they kind of, each of them kind of thought, yeah, like our current size is basically fine, but those were kind of additional thoughts if we wanted to consider changing the size, those were some additional considerations that were raised. In terms of like their clarity on their mission, most of them thought that their members were pretty clear on the mission, though I think each of them kind of said, I'll summarize it in the way that one chair said it to me. They were like, yeah, I think we mostly got it, but if you quizzed us, we'd probably get something like an 85 on it. So that was kind of interesting to say, like, there was, for most of them, I guess, like, there's the resolutions and there's whatever their mission, some of them are in the codes of ordinances and that's in there, but, there's no kind of like one-page sheet that gets handed to, a member who's being onboarded, or that a member of the public who's interested but doesn't know about it, like there's nothing for them to click through, or at least as far as folks were aware. And then in terms of like the connection to council, that had like a pretty wide range of how folks felt about that. There were some folks that kind of felt that their connection was good, and the common thread there seemed to be the ones that had forged a relationship with the Public Health and Safety Committee. Even within that, one of the chairs mentioned that even though that was prior to their time, they had heard that like in prior years they had felt like there was some disconnect in the connection with council, but that had been resolved in recent years, recent months, whatever the time frame was, by like reforging that connection to public health and safety. But the ones that didn't have that did seem to feel like they didn't really know.
Right.
And there was a sense that folks wanted to be connected to a committee.
Yeah.
So maybe we should think about a structure where every commissioner or board occasionally reports into the subcommittee.
That would be smart.
That had been brought up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I mean, some don't need that, like zoning hearing doesn't need to do that. UCC Board of Appeals doesn't need to do that.
right, they're more like technical, almost like,
Yeah, they're supposed
I
to
mean,
be
they're all
classy
sovereign, but
independent.
some of them are sovereign, right?
Yeah.
And then the other item was, there was, I think, at least one that kind of said that they felt like they didn't necessarily have like clear direction. that their establishing direction was clear, but that they kind of at this point felt like they were, my interpretation of the information that was provided to me was that they felt like they kind of knew what council wanted them to do-ish, but they were kind of almost, I don't want to say trying to divine it, but they didn't feel like the council had kind of like ever come back to them to say, yeah, here's kind of what we would like you guys to focus on.
We're not gonna get to the application because it's 6:46.
Yeah, we can always push it off, sure.
I can tell people are already out. So, and Fred always asks us to
Still had
stop,
a schedule.
you know, with a little bit.
Oh,
And I don't
the
know.
one last thing was, Narberth Industrial Development Authority wants to be active. And so they want you to let folks know that they're there and can help with projects if it qualifies, you know, under state law. So be aware of that, let folks know. I think nonprofits can get access to preferred loans through them and things that fall under manufacturing, which might be able to be broad, but if you don't know, at least take a look into it.
Yeah. Great. That's a good start. Do we,
Ongoing projects? There's nothing really to report.
I think I've
Oh, no, that's
reported
right.
on everything else.
Yeah. Do we have anybody out there? Public comment?
Nobody in the
Oh,
interweb.
okay. Okay, I guess I will move to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor of adjourning? Good.
Cool.
We're done.
Great.
Good.